All right, the recording's rolling. Welcome everybody to the May 16th Cloud Custodian Community Meeting. Popping the call notes, the agenda into the chat here and HackMD. And since the recording started, we are under the subject to the CNCF. I'm blanking on the word. Standards for behaving like decent people. What's that, Kapil?
Code of conduct.
Code of conduct. There you go. Yeah, be cool. Everybody be cool. And so here we go. I'm going to post the chat link one more time for folks who have come in fresh. And then we'll start sharing and talking through it. In the meantime, while we're getting the share going, if anyone would like to introduce themselves first time, or if it's been a while, feel free to jump in and say hello.
Hi, I'm Kevin. Long time, well, we've been using it a couple months, Custodian, and now I'm contributing. So yeah.
That's
I work
fantastic.
by the way. Yeah.
Welcome. Thanks for coming. Thanks for contributing like right away. So very cool. Glad to have you. All right. Anybody else for intros? Okay. Well, agenda here. So we've covered intros. They're pretty quick. We still have in here a little note just that this year we're going to be moving on from Python 3.7. Any folks out there still using it, there's just details in this linked issue. Just a heads up. Still pointing out tips and tricks we've got in the discussion section of our repo. We have some tips and tricks threads, and we're trying to pull some more in from Slack discussions, older Gitter discussions, or other things that are not in the docs, but that folks find helpful. And then the next piece would be the next release. I know that we had some PRs coming in to prepare for a next release. I don't know, Kapil or Sunny or Pratush, if you're aware of any blocking issues in the way of a new release.
So I think there's a little bit of work to do because of the poetry export thing, switching out dev groups, switching out from being a dev group, so I have to rewrite all the PyProjects entry for all the packages. And then there was one standby for GCP Cloud Run that I wanted to try to address, as far as like there was an ID name mismatch somewhere. That was already a called issue. That's the only two things that came to mind strongly for me. Obviously, people may have others.
Sorry, what was that last one? GCP Cloud Run?
Yeah, it's a Cloud Run metadata issue.
Okay. All right, we'll have to reference that then before release. That's cool. Sunny, Pratush, anything from your side, or anyone else on the call too, if there's something that seems.
Yeah, I can't think of any potential blockers.
All right.
Yeah, I got nothing on my end.
Cool, that's good news. Does anyone, so we've got a whole list here of the PRs issues that are open. I've got a couple, boom, just from some recent discussions. We can talk about them. But if anybody has any pressing questions or issues before we get to that, now is the time to raise them.
Yeah, just wanted to point out 8533, which introduced for any contributors that want to add additional functionality to JamesPath via additional functions. This PR effectively adds that. And also another note for contributors is to avoid using JamesPath.search wherever possible, because there's a new James Path _search function available in utils that will utilize whatever custom functions that we have in here.
Yeah,
And in this example specifically, if you look at the actions there under the copy related tag, there's a new split function that takes like a separator as well as the string value that you want to split, and that allows you to get a portion of the target string that you want.
Well, yeah, I mean, thanks for making this change and for bringing it up here, because I think this is really cool. And it's cool enough that when I saw it, I think there's going to be a lot of times where there's kind of a knee jerk, at least for me, to want to just add more functions and make James Path even cooler. But just these few things, I know split has come up a lot. So that's very cool that that's going to be available now.
Are there any others coming to mind that would be interesting?
Other James Path functions or other?
JMS path functions.
Yeah, there's a few that are sort of more in the not necessarily limited to Kubernetes, but are more obvious, I guess, in Kubernetes, like doing things like certificate, being able to like evaluate a certificate by doing like a X509 decode, or if things are base64 encoded, to be able to do the decode and then read from that. Like those are things that seen in other custom people implement custom functions in James Path for that as well. It would also seem useful. I think in AWS, there's not a whole lot of like base64 encoded stuff that pops up. Like the biggest thing that I can think of is sometimes when you get like an error message, the error itself will be base64 encoded.
Yeah, but there's typically like an API call to decode the error message, which is trying to prevent people, like it's more complicated. Like in AWS, I think it's user data is probably the biggest one I've seen. But we were
Yeah.
handle that and filter.
User data, for sure. User data came up when we were looking at some of the C7LF policies. I think base64, and also I had a PR recently to try to add a value type JSON transform, and I could see us making the case that doing a James Path function would be cleaner than adding another value type transform. You just do like a JSON decode or something in your key, and then not have that extra value type. But who knows?
I think for like I don't know, you can even imagine like folks where you have like a Lambda function, and I don't know, for some reason you have a JSON encoded string as an environment variable, like to be able to load that and check against values. Like, I mean, it'll most likely be very specific use cases where that'll be useful. But yeah, if stuff comes up, then this is the way to implement it.
Yeah, I'm curious if anyone else on the call has come up with these cases where you're trying to use a value filter or some other sort of James Path expression to get something and you just don't have enough flexibility. Just curious, beyond split, what kind of issues people have run into that we don't necessarily hear about because it's not really a bug, it's just a bit awkward to work with.
Oh, there's also the arithmetic as well.
Oh yeah.
Although we do cover a lot of the value filter can do arithmetic comparisons as well. So you don't you could have like a divide function or add function, whatever, to like an integer, but it seems a little bit I don't know. It doesn't seem as pressing, I guess, for the workloads that custodians typically associated with.
Yeah, it's fair. I think on similar to the change, I think. Kapil, you had a change recently with this this GCP recommender filter, and it seemed like a similarly wide-ranging sort of change where it might open up a bunch of different things.
Yeah, so I don't know how many people on the call are doing GCP, but if I dropped this also in FinOps, but this is it stretches across it's sort of like GCP recommenders is sort of like trusted advisor in AWS, just to make it understandable for those that are not using GCP. And this basically just gives us an ability, and this is across cost, security, a couple other dimensions. This is effectively just using the ability to use GCP recommenders directly as a filter for resources. GCP in this context also gives you a set of like remediation activities you can do yourself. Custodian generally implements those. So we just take in this case, we just like their recommendation is idle disk, snapshot it and delete it. And so we implement the actions just using our existing policy language. And so it's a nice detector. It's a standard, like in some cases, it's trusted advisor tends to be more just a stand-in for metrics. GCP recommenders are stand-in for metrics, but they also have some other stuff going on there where they're doing some deeper analysis. And so it was nicer to expose it directly, especially on the IAM side where they're actually tracking against like the actual permission usage and doing a bit of, ML, let's say, around things. And no BARD yet, but it seemed useful to expose directly. If you're in GCP, it's a good way to get to cost optimizations as well as security things. But they also have operational things. So there's a couple categories. I don't know. I think the actual docs have like the link of, there's like 24 of them as far as recommenders themselves.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for that. Was that these docs? I don't remember.
Yep, that's them.
Okay. Yeah, so that sounds cool. It seems like there's a lot of stuff we could do there. And you say Custodian generally has whatever the recommended action is. We generally have the actions already.
Except for like the IAM minimization ones that they do. I don't know that like GCP has a bunch of pre-canned roles and people use those roles and then they flag you for like having unused permissions and like, it's not, I don't think it's Custodian's place to create custom roles for you. So like there's some we can do, not in all cases, just based on what the actual scenario is. Obviously, typically we can do, deletion, let's say, where that is an acceptable remediation, but that is not always an acceptable remediation.
Sounds good at the time. Anybody have questions or comments on this one or the custom JSPath function? All right, well then yay to both of those, and we'll move on. Kevin, since you're here, we've got a couple here to talk about, but you joined. So hi.
Hi.
Welcome and thanks.
Yeah. Wait for my camera to spin up. It will spin up at some point. Okay, so one of the things we ran into with our own implementation is that we can't, there's no way to tag GKE clusters. And there was some prior art around this that talked about how that sort of worked. I re-implemented, I guess, that, but we still run into a spot where it fails because the cache entry, the fingerprint is like the first run, it's fine. The second run, the fingerprint is cached for the alt label status. And so the cache needs to be invalidated or the fingerprint needs to be refreshed in the cache when the modification is made. And I have been tracing back, trying to figure out how that gets populated, or how it works. Today I'm studying how it works for instances, because the same process is required for instances where it works, but not for GKE clusters. I would love some advice on where to find that. Oh yeah, there you go. And then I would love some help getting you response code out of all of the responses so that the tests will actually run.
So two things. On the fingerprint thing, I think the right thing, the simplest thing, is just going to be refetch the resource and retry in line to the action. Like basically, try catch, fingerprint mismatch, go fetch current.
Right. Okay.
Try again, and I think that is going to be the simplest thing and the most robust thing also. Because like you might have multiple actions that try to tag, let's say, and even if you fetch for one, like it just keeps the things relatively simple and sane. I think we've done that in at least one other resource. I forgot which one. On the GCP side, second one on the test stuff. I would just try to record one. We try to like inject project ID like into like switch that out if there's other stuff that you feel like is sensitive to your environment organization, drop a message in Slack and like the dev channel, and we can see about like changing, like fixing the recording framework, because like we don't want people to have to do that manually. So definitely like if there's things that you feel like that are coming out that are sensitive, but like the intention is the default should do something sane as part of recording. And if not, happy to have a separate discussion about that as well.
Yeah, it comes down to the included credentials for the tests don't allow you to set labels, or there's something along the lines where you get a credential area when using the Custodian included credentials trying to run the tests or record the tests. So that's something we can talk about offline. Yeah,
like there's like a transient credential thing for a second. You should be able to delete that. Like those things are only valid for like a short amount of time before they go invalid. B, you can manually delete those and not commit them. I don't know that we have any of those committed.
there is certainly a credentials file. Hold on, I'm staring at the code now.
Yeah, there's a dummy credentials file for GCP.
That may be why recording doesn't work if those credentials are I'm not gonna say invalid.
Okay,
yeah.
So for recording, so you're having a challenge like mechanically recording. You typically just run the PyTest directly against your test. You have like instead of replay, you say record. Sometimes you need to pass in the project ID. And then when you're done recording the test, you switch back to replay and switch the project ID to Cloud. I think it's Cloud-Custodian for the project name. And your credentials should never be saved per se.
Yeah.
I know. I think this was actually, sorry, I said GCP, but it was like an AWS thing where like certain authentication forms in their cloud provider would like create like an SDS type of validation thing, but I don't think that's the case in GCP. Now I think about it.
Yeah, there's a credentials JSON in the test data directory, and I don't know if those are dummy or quote unquote real.
It's a straight dummy. It's just there just to satisfy like the client workflow. It's not something that's necessary. It's just for the replay, and it's not a live thing.
Okay. So yeah, I'll poke at it and hit up on Slack.
Would we expect for those recordings for folks to have to set like those environment variables like Cloud SDK Core Project and Google Application Credentials so that the tests pull in the right stuff at runtime?
You can set that there, and that would work. The challenge, like I noticed, I was going through some GCP tests on something else, and they were setting the project ID directly in the test code. Partly that was because like I think some of the way the filters or actions or test assertions worked actually needed to validate certain things that had the project ID in it. And so when you go to record, it's whatever your actual project ID is. When you go to replay, it's always a Cloud Custodian, just so we can get the the project ID out of any recorded data that we are that's submitted to the repo. If a test doesn't care about that, and the resource and filter or the filter action doesn't care about that, then it's fine to not even specify project ID and let the environment variable take over.
I figured that was probably what was going to end up happening was, use the credentials I have for our projects and then sanitize to match the dummy credentials and things. So cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's always worth taking a look at the diff. Like if you have, I mean, generally speaking, your test resources are transient, you're going to tear them down. Like if there's like a public IP or something, all that jazz. It really just depends on, it's worth taking a look at, and flagging anything that you think is of concern and heading up on Slack. The intention was that we do the default standard thing. So subscription ID, account ID, project ID is sort of where we aim for as a baseline.
Cool. Excellent. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you for contributing.
Yeah, for sure. I think we're all going to learn something from that one. That's good. All right, the next boomed one here is we just got this one in for a couple new Azure resources. Looked reasonable to me, but I didn't know if other folks. The only thing that jumped out as seeming a little bit weird is the resource definition just being all mushed together. Looked a little. Let me zoom in. Of course, late in the meeting, zoom in so people can actually read stuff. I didn't know if we'd want to switch to that kebab type case like CDN dash custom dash domain, and I saw that we have Azure resources. We have existing resources in both formats. Sometimes we're one form, like one is an alias for another. So I don't know if any folks on this call have strong opinions on how we should name Azure resources.
I dislike the smush. It is worth. Generally, when we alias, we try to make the alias the compatibility one, and the actual one the real one. Besides that, like I guess I prefer kebabs.
Okay.
But yeah, aiming for consistency across many contributors is always a challenge.
Yeah. So I was gonna just reply to this and just comment with what sounded good at the time. I thought we've got a community meeting. Let's talk it through.
And the challenge is like even on consistency, it's like provider specific consistency. Like in some cases, like in GCP, I was just like pub sub dash topic, like where pub sub is like even in the same resource, you have both styles. So that's a judgment call. I would try to aim for whatever the majority is, and if you use the alias as a contributor to backwards compatibility, aim for doing the one that was intended as modern.
Okay. All right, but you were saying for this one, you prefer the kebabs like CDN custom domain with the dashes here. Looks more like
I'd also defer to what's predominant already.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to look for patterns, and I saw both in Azure. So that's why it wasn't clear. I mean, I could see, and what I wasn't sure about was the history. So if we added one called CDN custom domain with the kebab style there, would it be worth adding the alias if there's nothing to be compatible with because it wasn't an existing resource? Would it still be worth adding that mush together alias only because some existing resources have it?
Yeah, we generally don't add the alias unless it's compatibility thing.
Okay.
Or maybe you like in AWS, I think for like IP address or something, like I think we may have done it there because the default was caused more questions about like, hey, what does it actually look like? Like people couldn't find the default, let's say. In this case, it's the same name. Like in that case, it was like a completely different name just to match what people expected. But in this case, it's just a hyphenation thing. it might be worth, like, it's a separate PR, like looking at all the ones that are glommed, or I don't know what the phrase is,
Yeah.
but and creating the kebabs form as an alias.
Yeah, that's a good call. All right, then maybe we'll push for this one to use to add the kebabs and then have a follow-up issue to add aliases. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, then we can, if there's no consistency, we can make it. Cool.
Yeah. So and if we do have the aliases, we should make the kebab the default because that's what gets documented.
Yeah.
And the aliases are just there for compatibility.
That sounds good. Thanks. All right, those are the only ones that I see. The only issues or peers that I see boomed here for specific discussion. There were a couple holdovers from the last meeting. I know there's still this copy-related tag, and the value from supporting DynamoDB. I don't know of any updates to those.
Yeah, this one I started to look at the RDS failure, AJ.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think I couldn't reproduce it on my end. I think I have to like spin up resources in a certain way to like reproduce this error on my local account. But yeah, I'll try to look at it today and see if I could like reproduce the same errors. I tried doing it. I couldn't create the issue, but it's still happening. I don't know why, but yeah, I'll take a look at it.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, thanks for looking into that one, because I have not. Okay, I think that's all that I'm aware of. Anybody else have any questions, comments on what has come already, or anything new we haven't talked about yet? All right, then we could say going once, twice, and 3 times, and that'll be the end of this meeting then. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the questions,
Thank you.
contributions, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks all.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers.